Imagine an English yachtsman who sets sail on this grand sweeping adventure, and he loses his bearings, slightly miscalculates his course, and eventually lands his boat on what he, fully believes to be a strange, completely undiscovered island in the South Seas.
Right. He thinks he's totally off the map.
Exactly. So he steps off the boat, he's armed to the teeth, he's communicating entirely by these frantic hand signs to the locals. He is fully prepared to plant his country's flag on some barbaric temple.
I love this image so much.
It's so good. But as he squints and looks a little closer, he realizes that this barbaric temple is actually the pavilion at Brighton.
Yeah.
He hasn't discovered a new savage world at all. He has just discovered England.
It's brilliant because you get the terrifying thrill of exploring a strange land, but it's totally combined with the immense sudden comfort of realizing you've just come home.
Yeah, exactly. Welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. Today we are pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources, specifically G.K. Chesterton's 1908 classic book, Orthodoxy.
Along with, a variety of modern theological commentaries that analyze its impact today.
Right. And our mission for this deep dive is extremely specific. We are looking at this brilliant, paradoxical text and asking a very direct question. How does this book inspire Christians to love Christ more deeply and live for him more fully in their daily, ordinary lives?
Yeah, we aren't just doing a detached history or a philosophy lesson here.
No, not at all. Think of this as pulling a practical toolkit for your daily devotion out of a century-old masterpiece.
And to set the stage properly, it really helps to understand why Chesterton wrote this book in the first place. Because he didn't write it in a vacuum.
Right, there was a whole controversy behind it.
Totally. Orthodoxy is actually a spiritual autobiography, but it was born out of a very public challenge. A few years prior, he published a book called Heretics, where he basically took a sledgehammer to the prominent modern thinkers of his day, men like H.G. Wells and George Bernard Shaw.
He went right after the heavyweights.
He did. And he criticized their philosophies for being too small or too pessimistic or just detached from reality.
And, people don't generally like it when you tear down their entire worldview without offering an alternative.
No, they really don't.
Right. So I'm assuming his critics demanded he present his own solution.
They absolutely did. A critic named G.S. Street essentially threw down the gauntlet. He basically said, "It is very easy to criticize everyone else's cosmic theory, Mr. Chesterton, but we haven't seen yours."
Put up or shut up.
Exactly. So orthodoxy was his response. He wanted to demonstrate that the historic Apostles' Creed, which, secular society viewed as a boring, restrictive cage that locks you away from intellectual freedom, is actually the most thrilling, romantic, and sane worldview in existence.
Wow. And that brings us back to the yachtsman.
Right. Chesterton argued that he was that English yachtsman. He spent his youth trying to invent his own personal, radical heresy, like a totally new avant-garde philosophy of the universe.
As you do when you're young and intellectual, right?
Yeah, exactly. But when he finally put the finishing touches on his grand original theory, he looked at it and realized he had simply stumbled backward into ancient Christian orthodoxy.
That is hilarious.
He thought he was the first man to discover this thrilling new way of seeing the universe, only to find out he was about 1,800 years late.
I love that framing because it completely changes how you view ancient doctrines. But I want to start where Chesterton starts. Because to understand this thrilling romance, we apparently have to look at what happens when humanity loses it.
Yeah, he takes a very unexpected route here.
Looking through the source material, I was totally caught off guard. He doesn't start his defense of the Christian faith in a cathedral or a university. He starts in a lunatic asylum.
He does, because Chesterton understands that before we can deepen our daily devotion or even talk about theology, we have to examine the mechanics of how we actually see the world.
Because if your lens is cracked, everything you look at is distorted.
Exactly. If your fundamental perspective on reality is broken, your faith becomes completely stagnant. So he argues that to understand sanity, we have to deeply examine madness. And he completely redefines what we think of as madness.
Yeah, because the common assumption is that a madman is someone whose logic has evaporated, right? Someone who has just lost his reason and descended into total chaos.
But Chesterton observes the exact opposite. He says the madman is not the man who has lost his reason. The madman is the person who has lost everything except his reason.
Wait, I need you to pause and explain the mechanics of that. Because having too much reason sounds like a paradox that shouldn't even be possible. How can pure logic make someone insane?
Well, think about the actual conversations you might have with someone suffering from severe paranoia. If you argue with a madman, Chesterton notes, you will almost certainly lose the argument.
Really? Why?
Because his mind moves in a perfect, closed, logical circle. His explanation of reality is entirely complete, but it is incredibly narrow.
Okay, I think I see where you're going with this.
Like, if a man believes a vast conspiracy is out to get him, and you say to him, look, all these people deny they are conspiring against you, he simply replies, of course they deny it. That is exactly what conspirators do to cover their tracks.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the logic is utterly watertight.
It accounts for every single piece of data.
But it leaves out the human element. It leaves out, common sense.
It leaves out humor, charity, the casual indifference of strangers, just the messiness of actual human behavior. The madman's explanation is logically perfect, but it is small.
Right.
It requires ignoring the vast, expansive complexity of life to maintain its perfect internal consistency. Chesterton likens this to a solipsist.
Remind us what a solipsist is again.
It's the person who believes that he is the only thing that actually exists, and the rest of the universe is just a projection of his own mind.
Oh.
You can't logically disprove the solipsist. His argument is flawless, but he is still a lunatic trapped in a tiny mental prison.
I'm trying to picture this in a modern context. And it sounds exactly like a beautifully programmed AI.
Oh, that's a great way to think about it.
Right. Imagine an artificial intelligence that can calculate 1 million complex algorithms a second. It is flawlessly logical. If you feed it a premise, it will give you the inescapable conclusion every single time.
Yes.
But it have absolutely no concept of a sunset, or a joke, or a mother's love, or the concept of mercy. It possesses pure reason, but it is completely detached from the messy, expansive reality of being alive. It is perfectly logical and completely insane.
That is a highly accurate analogy for what Chesterton was attacking. He points out that this AI-like mindset is the exact trap of modern skepticism and materialism.
How so?
Well, the strict materialist looks at the universe and says there is no God, there is no soul. Everything is just blind causation, physics, and chemical reactions.
Right, the universe is a machine.
And just like the madman, the materialist explanation is logically complete. If we're just highly evolved apes with chemical reactions in our brains, then everything is determined by physics. The logic works.
But, and this is a huge but, if that is true, they've committed what Chesterton calls the suicide of thought.
Exactly, because if our thoughts are just random chemical reactions governed by blind physical laws, why on earth should we trust our own logic?
Yeah. Why should we trust the specific thought that tells us we are just chemical reactions that eats its own tail?
Precisely. If your brain is just meat reacting to stimuli, your thoughts aren't true. They are just inevitable chemical byproducts, like digestion.
Wow.
So materialism is a thought that destroys all thought. It destroys free will, it destroys hope, and ultimately it destroys the very foundation of reason itself.
It's wild because modern secularism claims to champion science and reason.
Right, but by removing the creator, it removes any rational basis for trusting our own minds. Christianity, paradoxically, acts as the ultimate defense of human reason because it grounds our intellect in a rational creator who designed us to perceive truth.
So the materialist cosmos is perfectly logical, but incredibly tiny and suffocating. It's like living in a windowless room.
A very clean, well-organized room, but yes, no windows.
So how do we break out of that? If pure logic is a trap, what's the alternative?
Chesterton suggests that to combat this maddeningly small logic, we shouldn't look to philosophers. We should return to the nursery.
The nursery?
Yeah, we have to look at the ethics of Elfland, the philosophy found in fairy tales.
Okay, that sounds really whimsical, but I know Chesterton isn't just being cute here. He means something deeply profound by Elfland, doesn't he?
He really does. He realized that fairy tales teach us the true ethics of existence. Think about it. In a scientific materialist view, things happen because of a cold mechanical necessity. Water boils at a certain temperature because it must.
An apple falls because gravity dictates it must.
Exactly. But in a fairy tale, things happen not because of blind law, but because of a story, because of magic. Cinderella can go to the ball, but she must return by midnight.
Right, why midnight?
There is no scientific logical reason. It is simply the condition of the gift. The fairy tale teaches us that the world is a gift, not a mechanical necessity.
So how does this translate into a practical mindset for the listener? I mean, we spend so much of our lives treating the world like a clockwork machine. The sun comes up, we commute, the seasons change, gravity keeps us on the ground.
It all feels so brutally routine.
Yes. And honestly, that routine often leads to a terrible spiritual jadedness.
Yeah.
We just get bored with the universe.
And that boredom is exactly what Chesterton is attacking. He suggests that the sun rises every morning not because of some blind, lifeless law of physics, but because God has what he beautifully calls the eternal appetite of infancy.
Wait, the eternal appetite of infancy. I need to understand that. How is God acting like an infant?
Think of a young child who finds a game they love or a trick they find funny. What do they say?
Do it again?
Exactly, do it again. And the adult does it again. And the child says, do it again, until the adult is completely exhausted.
Oh, I've been there.
Right. Chesterton argues that we grown-ups get tired of repetition because we have sinned and grown old. We lack the vitality to sustain wonder. But our Father is younger than we are. God has an infinite capacity for joy. So he looks at the sun every morning and says, do it again. He looks at the moon every night and says, do it again.
That is incredible.
The routine of the universe isn't due to a lifeless mechanical law. It is due to a rushing, exuberant, deliberate excess of life.
That completely flips the script on how I view a mundane Tuesday morning. I mean, think about Lamentations 3, where it says, his mercies are new every morning. If you actually apply Chesterton's lens to your daily devotion, you stop viewing your morning coffee or a child's laugh or the sunrise as just the gears of the universe turning.
Yeah, you see it as a deliberate, repeated miracle.
A fresh gift from a God who delights in existence. It shatters the mundane view of your day.
It really restores a childlike wonder. It turns the physical world into an enchanted place again. But if we adopt this perspective, if we truly wake up and view the world as a magical, deliberate gift from a loving creator, a massive, unavoidable problem immediately arises.
Right. Because if the world is this beautiful, enchanted gift, why is it so full of pain? Why do we have cancer wards and war zones and deep, agonizing grief?
Exactly. How does a Christian actually live in a world that is simultaneously a miraculous gift and a deeply broken mess?
And this leads to Chesterton's concept of the cosmic patriot, right? Which outlines how we are supposed to relate to a fallen world.
Yes.
And this is vital for daily faith. You can't just ignore the bad, right? That's delusional. But you also can't despise the good. The sources show Chesterton criticizing two very common opposing responses to the suffering in the world: the blind optimist and the despairing pessimist.
He views both of them as fundamentally flawed. The blind optimist is the person who tries to whitewash the world's evils. They look at suffering and say, everything is fine, human nature is naturally good, progress is inevitable.
Toxic positivity on a cosmic scale.
Exactly. And Chesterton argues this is a false comfort, and practically it leads to terrible stagnation. If you believe everything is already fine, there is absolutely no reason to fight to fix anything.
But the pessimist, the person who focuses entirely on the darkness, he reserves a special kind of fury for the pessimist, doesn't he?
Oh, yeah. He calls the pessimist a cosmic anti-patriot. This is the person who looks at the suffering, the injustice, and the pain and decides to simply hate the universe. They refuse to love existence.
They just want to burn it all down.
Right. But Chesterton points out a very practical reality. A man who hates his country will only destroy it or abandon it. It is only the man who loves his country who will bleed to fix its flaws.
Let me play devil's advocate here for a second, because this brings up a really challenging theological question for the listener.
Okay, let's hear it.
If a Christian is supposed to find their ultimate hope in heaven, if we're, citizens of another kingdom, doesn't that naturally make us pessimistic or apathetic about this current world? Like, why bother fixing the deck chairs on a sinking ship? Shouldn't we just hate this fallen world and wait for the next one?
That is a profound question, and it's a trap many believers fall into. But Chesterton answers it with the concept of the flag of the world.
The flag of the world.
Yeah. He argues that we must be cosmic patriots. We have to swear an oath of allegiance to existence itself simply because God made it and called it good. We have to love the world before we can reform it.
How does that work in practice? Loving something before you reform it.
Well, Chesterton uses the example of a rundown, ugly London neighborhood called Pimlico.
Oh, okay.
He says if you just hate Pimlico, you'll either leave it or you'll burn it to the ground. If you blindly approve of Pimlico, it will just remain a slum.
Right, that's the optimist and the pessimist.
Exactly. But if someone loves Pimlico with a fierce, transcendental, almost irrational love, the way a mother loves a wayward child, they will tear down the slums and build ivory towers. They will clean the streets. They will fight for it.
Wow.
They will reform it because they love it.
So our devotion requires us to love the earth. But I struggle with how to frame that love without crossing a line. I mean, how do we love the world without worshiping it? Because history is full of people who elevated the earth to the status of a god.
This is where Chesterton highlights a beautiful, crucial distinction that historic Christianity makes. He points out that in the Christian worldview, nature is not our mother, nature is our sister.
Nature is our sister.
Uh-huh.
That shifts the entire dynamic. How does he differentiate that from paganism?
Think about it. In paganism or pantheism or even modern radical environmentalism, nature is viewed as a mother, Mother Nature.
Right.
And if nature is your mother, you are subordinate to her. You must submit to her. You must imitate her. And as we know, nature can be incredibly cruel. She is, red in tooth and claw.
Disease, predation, natural disaster.
Exactly. If you worship nature as a mother, you ultimately end up imitating or accepting her cruelties as just the way things are.
But because nature is our sister, we share the same father.
Yeah.
God is the parent. We in the natural world are fellow creations.
Exactly. And practically, this frees the believer to steward creation joyfully without turning it into an idol. You can enjoy a majestic mountain or a quiet forest as a beautiful sibling, crafted by the same father. You can delight in her beauty, you can protect her, but you don't bow down to her. You don't look to the behavior of animals for your morality. Nature has no authority over you.
So we love the world as a sister. We wave the flag of the world as cosmic patriots, and because we love it so much, we become deeply invested in its restoration.
Which turns the believer into a furious reformer. Chesterton says the Christian optimist is the most furious reformer of all. We accept the sheer fact of existence with immense, staggering gratitude, but we violently reject the evil that has infected it.
Think about what that means for your prayer life today. When you pray the Lord's Prayer and you say, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven," you are not just reciting a polite religious poem.
No, not at all.
You are engaging in a holy rebellion. You are waving the flag of the world while actively fighting the darkness that currently occupies it. You are telling God, "I love this world you made, and I am furious at the sin that is destroying it."
That dual stance is the essence of the Christian rebel. We are defending the fortress of existence, but we are aggressively fighting the dragons that have invaded it.
I love that.
But living as this cosmic patriot requires a massive psychological and spiritual feat. It requires holding two incredibly fierce, opposing ideas at the exact same time. A fierce love for the world and a fierce hatred for its sin.
And this brings us to the very core of Chesterton's theological vision, the balancing paradoxes of historic Christianity.
The balancing paradoxes. This is where Chesterton's mind is just explosive.
Yeah, he noticed that critics of Christianity often attack it for completely contradictory reasons.
Yes, this was actually a major turning point in Chesterton's own journey from agnosticism to faith. He read all the secular critics of his day, the rationalists, the atheists, the skeptics, and he noticed a bizarre pattern in their attack.
Oh, but the pattern.
One critic, perhaps influenced by Schopenhauer, would say Christianity is a terrible religion because it is far too pessimistic, too gloomy, and tells people to hate life and wear sackcloth. Then, the very next critic would say Christianity is terrible because it is a fool's paradise, a pink and white nursery of naive optimism that ignores the harsh realities of life.
He gives so many examples of this in the book. One writer says Christianity is too timid and pacifist. It's all turn the other cheek and sheepish weakness.
Right.
And the next writer says it's the mother of all wars, responsible for the Crusades, the Inquisition, and rivers of blood. One says it attacks family life by celebrating celibate monks. Another says it traps people in the rigid confines of the traditional family.
Exactly. And Chesterton realized something profound. If a man is accused of being far too tall by one person and far too short by another person, there's a very good chance he is exactly the right height.
That makes perfect sense.
But his realization went much deeper than just seeing Christianity as a moderate middle ground. He realized that Christianity isn't a watered-down compromise between extremes. It isn't a dull, dirty gray mixed from black and white.
Right, it doesn't just average out the extremes. It keeps the contrasting colors pure and at full strength, side by side. The red is furious, and the white is blinding.
Yes.
Let me try to visualize this for you listening. Think of a massive suspension bridge like the Golden Gate. If you look at suspension bridge, it doesn't stand up because there is an absence of tension. It doesn't just rest peacefully.
No, it's under immense stress.
Right. It stands firm precisely because massive steel cables are pulling in completely opposite directions with terrifying, almost unfathomable force. The bridge is stable. It can carry the weight of 1,000,000 cars, not because there is no tension, but because the extreme tension is perfectly balanced.
That is a superb analogy for historic orthodoxy. The church maintains an irregular equilibrium. It doesn't tell us to just feel a mild, lukewarm, Buddhist-like detachment from everyone and everything. It tells us to let our passions run wild, but in their proper lanes.
So how does that apply to a virtue like courage? Chesterton points out that real courage is almost a contradiction in terms, right?
He argues that courage is a strong desire to live, taking the form of a readiness to die.
Wow.
As Jesus said, "He that will lose his life shall save it." The Christian martyr is the ultimate example of this furious balance. The martyr loves life so much, values the truth of existence so highly, that he is willing to die for it. He dies that something may live.
Which is completely different from someone who just despises life and throws it away.
Completely different. The suicide despises life and destroys it. The martyr loves life and sacrifices his own. Christianity holds up a fierce, defiant disdain for death alongside a fierce, passionate love for life.
I want to ground this in the everyday experience of the listener. How does this furious balance affect how we view crime or justice or the people who wrong us in our daily lives?
Well, think about the pagan or purely rational approach to a criminal. The secular instinct is often to dilute everything, to say, well, society's partly to blame, genetics play a role, the man is partly to blame, so let's just feel a mild mixed sympathy and a mild mixed anger.
Everything just becomes a gray blur of determinism.
Exactly. But Christianity, Chesterton says, cleaves that in two with a sword. It violently divides the crime from the criminal.
This is the old hate the sin, love the sinner concept, but dialed up to an absolute extreme.
Yes. We are commanded to forgive the criminal 70 times 7. Our love, our mercy, our pity for the human being must be completely unbounded.
But our hatred for the crime, the injustice, the cruelty, that must also be completely unbounded.
Exactly. We don't dilute our anger at injustice to make it match our pity for the man, nor do we dilute our love for the sinner because of our anger at the crime. Both passions run wild side by side.
And this brings us to the ultimate devotional application, the person of Jesus himself. Because Chesterton notes that we often try to water down Jesus to fit our modern sensibilities.
Oh, absolutely.
We picture him as this mild, sheepish philosopher who just wandered around the Galilean countryside smiling at birds and flowers.
And that image is a complete modern fabrication. The Jesus of the Gospels is an overwhelming, terrifyingly paradoxical figure.
How so?
Well, Chesterton points out his language. It wasn't just sweet and submissive. It was gigantesque. He talked of hurling mountains into the sea, of camels leaping through the eyes of needles. He had lips of thunder. He braided a whip of cords and violently hurled tables down the steps of the temple.
Yet he also wept openly. He wept at the tomb of Lazarus. He wept over the city of Jerusalem, hiding none of his pathos or vulnerability. He's the Lion of Judah and the Lamb of God.
And he keeps both of those identities at full strength. He doesn't average them out into a moderately grumpy sheep.
Think about what this means for your daily devotion. To love Christ more deeply is to embrace his fullness. Don't shrink him down to a manageable one-dimensional figure.
It's so tempting to do that, though.
It is. But don't make him a mascot for your own personal mildness or your own political anger. Let yourself be awestruck by a Savior who is infinitely majestic, capable of blazing holy anger against the evil that destroys his creation, yet infinitely intimate, capable of weeping with you in your quietest, most hidden grief.
But here is the danger. If we are called to live with these wildly opposing passions, fierce love and fierce wrath, boundless mercy and boundless anger, how do we prevent ourselves from just becoming erratic or self-righteous?
Right, because that sounds exhausting and potentially unstable.
It is. If we are engaged in this eternal revolution against the world's brokenness, what keeps us grounded? Chesterton recognized that a furious balance requires a massive anchor. We need a standard to measure our revolution against.
Which brings up the modern obsession with progress. We love that word today. We want society to progress. We want our personal lives to progress. But Chesterton points out a fatal flaw in how we usually think about progress, doesn't he?
The flaw is that modern thinkers are constantly changing the ideal they are aiming for. They tear down old institutions and values, claiming they are making progress. But as Chesterton argues, you cannot logically have progress if you keep altering the test.
What do you mean?
Well, if you want to know if a woman is making progress toward being more elegant, you have to have a fixed standard of elegance. If halfway through she suddenly decides she wants to be oblong, you can't measure her progress anymore.
That's a very Chestertonian example.
Right, but the point stands. Progress requires a fixed, unchanging ideal.
And for the Christian, this fixed ideal isn't some utopian future we've never seen. It is Eden, the original perfection.
Exactly. The eternal revolution that Chesterton talks about is actually a restoration. We aren't just blindly stumbling into the future hoping whatever comes next is magically better. We have a blueprint of what humanity was supposed to be before the fall, and we are fighting to reclaim the goodness that was lost.
Which means we have to acknowledge that something was lost. We have to talk about the fall.
And this is where Chesterton brings in what he calls the most empirically verifiable doctrine of all time: original sin.
I remember reading this part of the source material and just laughing out loud. He says original sin is the only part of Christian theology that can really be proved.
It's true.
You don't need a theology degree. You just have to look out the window at the street. We know humans are broken. The evidence is overwhelming.
He was writing against the modern secularists who were trying to deny human sin. They were trying to say humans are naturally perfectible through education or science alone.
Right.
And Chesterton found this absurd. He said the moderns were trying to deny human sin, which they could see in the street, while admitting divine sinlessness, which they couldn't see even in their dreams. Christianity looks at reality honestly and says, no, man is a broken God. Man is fallen.
But let me stop you there, because the outline highlights a specific phrase he uses that I found incredibly jarring. He calls the doctrine of original sin democratic.
Yes.
Calling human brokenness democratic sounds totally counterintuitive. Usually we think of sin as something that creates a hierarchy, the good people judging the bad people. How does Chesterton get from human depravity to democracy?
Think about the political systems of history. Aristocracies and oligarchies rely entirely on the myth of innate human superiority. They rely on the idea that the king, or the wealthy nobleman, or the intellectual elite is fundamentally a better breed of human than the peasant.
Right, they have noble blood.
Exactly. But if original sin is true, it means we are all survivors of the exact same shipwreck. We are all fundamentally broken. The king's heart is just as prone to darkness as the beggar's. It creates a profound, leveling solidarity.
Because it creates a healthy structural suspicion of human power.
Yes. Chesterton notes that historic Christianity uniquely distrusts the rich and the powerful because it knows all men are fallen.
That makes a lot of sense.
The secular world looks at a successful, wealthy man and says, a man in that high, respectable position wouldn't take a bribe or abuse his power. Christianity looks at the same man and says, any man in any position might take a bribe because human nature is fallen and the temptations of power are immense.
In fact, Christianity maintains that the most dangerous environment for the soul is a highly comfortable, wealthy environment. Jesus said it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God.
Yes. To be rich is to be in peculiar danger of moral wreck.
Which is why the doctrine of the fall is so liberating. It protects society from trusting blindly in human rulers or elites.
Exactly.
Think about the devotional weight of this for a moment. Believing in original sin shouldn't make you depressed. It should keep you incredibly humble. It means you don't inherently trust worldly status, wealth, or power, either in the politicians you vote for or in yourself.
Right.
It keeps your daily walk focused entirely on grace. You realize that your own comfort, the things you strive so hard to achieve, might actually be spiritually dangerous. It shifts your reliance off of human capability and onto Christ's redemption.
And because we hold this healthy distrust of current human power and the changing whims of the elite, we realize we can't just rely on the opinions of the people who happen to be alive and powerful right now. We need broader counsel.
Which brings us to one of Chesterton's most famous and enduring concepts, the democracy of the dead.
It's such a brilliant phrase.
I've heard this quoted so many times. Chesterton argues that tradition means giving votes to the most obscure of all classes, our ancestors. It is the democracy of the dead. It refuses to submit to the small and arrogant oligarchy of those who merely happen to be walking about.
It is a profound way to view Christian history and the historic creeds. We aren't just listening to the loudest voices on the internet today. We are consulting the accumulated wisdom of thousands of years of believers.
But I have to push back here on behalf of modern listeners, because a very natural fear arises. Doesn't clinging to old traditions, old creeds, and dead theologians, doesn't that stifle the Holy Spirit's movement in our daily lives today? Doesn't it make our faith rigid, legalistic, and just, stuck in the past?
It's a common fear, but Chesterton would argue that the exact opposite is true. Relying on the historic creeds and the witness of the saints, that cloud of witnesses mentioned in Hebrews, actually frees us.
How does it free us?
Think about it. Every age, every decade has its own blind spots, its own collective obsessions, and its own toxic fads. If you only listen to the voices of your current decade, you are trapped. You are a slave to the zeitgeist, the spirit of the age.
Someone once said, if you marry the spirit of the age, you will be a widow in the next generation.
Precisely. Tradition is the antidote to the arrogance of the present moment. By consulting the democracy of the dead, you are stepping outside the narrow prison of the 21st century and breathing the fresh air of eternity.
So practically speaking, when you sit down for your daily devotion and you recite the Apostles' Creed or you read an ancient church father, you aren't just reciting dusty, outdated poetry.
Oh.
You are joining a massive, time-tested chorus of martyrs, saints, and ordinary believers across 2,000 years who found this specific truth solid enough to live for and die for. It protects you from the spiritual amnesia and the anxiety of the modern world.
And this leads us to the ultimate question of Chesterton's journey. If we have this childlike wonder, this holy rebellion against evil, these fierce balancing paradoxes, and this solid anchor of historic tradition, what does it actually look like to live it out?
Right.
Doesn't living within the strict dogma of the Christian faith make life boring and restrictive? Does it kill the adventure?
This is where Chesterton brings the whole argument to a magnificent climax. He says the secular world views dogma as a wall that locks you in a prison. But he says dogma is actually the map that makes the adventure possible.
You cannot have a true adventure in a land of pure anarchy. Stories require rules.
That's so true.
If you are reading a novel and literally anything can happen for absolutely no reason, gravity suddenly turns off, the hero turns into a chair, the villain ceases to exist without cause, there is no tension, no thrill, and no meaning.
Right. A game is only fun because it has out-of-bounds lines.
Exactly. Dogma provides the rules of the universe. It tells us what is real. It is a map that allows you to explore the vastness of human experience safely without falling off the edge into despair or madness.
And when you trust the map, you can stop obsessing over whether the ground is going to hold you, and you can actually start enjoying the journey. I think about his brilliant image of angels here. He writes, "Angels can fly because they can take themselves lightly."
That might be one of the most profound psychological insights in the entire book.
It's beautiful.
It really is. Seriousness is not always a virtue. It is very often just the heavy downward gravity of pride. Satan fell by the force of gravity. He took himself too seriously. He was obsessed with his own dignity. But when we accept the truth of our faith, when we submit to the dogma of a creator who loves us, we completely lose the crushing burden of our own egos.
We don't have to be the center of the universe anymore, and what a relief that is.
Such a relief.
The source text points out something so countercultural here. Modern self-help constantly tells us we need an expansion of the self. We need to self-actualize, realize our own potential, focus inward. But Chesterton says we don't want an expansion of the ego. We want a contraction of the ego so that we can look outward at the expansion of the universe.
Yes.
John the Baptist had the perfect formula for joy. He must increase, I must decrease.
If your daily devotion is entirely focused inward, constantly monitoring your own spiritual temperature, your own anxieties, your own potential, you will eventually suffocate in the tiny room of yourself. But if your daily devotion is about forgetting yourself, taking yourself lightly, and staring outward at the staggering majesty of God, you will learn to fly.
And staring outward brings us to the emotional and theological core of Chesterton's vision, the ultimate reason why this faith is a thrilling romance. It doesn't just rest on a set of rules. It rests on the courage of the Creator.
The passion of Christ. Christianity is entirely unique among world religions. It is the only religion on earth that has felt that omnipotence made God, in a sense, incomplete.
Wait, God incomplete? This is almost heretical. How can omnipotence be incomplete?
Well, to be wholly, comprehensively God, he had to experience everything good. But there is a virtue that omnipotence cannot experience. Courage.
Oh.
True courage means facing real danger. It means taking a risk. It means passing a breaking point and choosing not to break. But an omnipotent, invulnerable God sitting safely in the heavens cannot experience risk or danger.
Because he can't be hurt.
Exactly. Therefore, to experience the supreme virtue of courage, God had to become vulnerable. He had to become human. He had to be a rebel as well as a king.
This is so awe-inspiring when you think about the mechanics of the incarnation. Think about Gethsemane and the cross. Chesterton says that in the Garden of Gethsemane, when Jesus is sweating blood and agonizing over the path ahead, God tempted God.
Yes.
And on the cross, when Jesus cries out, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" Chesterton points out that for one unthinkable, mysterious moment, God was forsaken by God.
It is a mystery that theologians have trembled to approach for 2 millennia. the Godhead experiencing isolation. But it holds a profoundly practical grounding comfort for the believer.
Tell me more about that.
No other worldview, no other philosophy offers a God who has his back against the wall, who suffers physical and emotional agony, who joins us in the deepest, darkest trench of human despair.
Think about what this means for you on a random Tuesday when you are feeling completely isolated, overwhelmed by a diagnosis, or drowning in anxiety. Chesterton is pointing out that you aren't praying to some distant, untouched, stoic deity in the clouds who has no idea what you're going through.
No.
You are praying to a God who knows exactly what it feels like to be betrayed, to be terrified, to have his back against the wall, and to feel forsaken. You are praying to the ultimate adventurer, a captain who has descended into hell and burst the gates of death from the inside out. When you face sorrow, your devotion is deepened by knowing your Savior has tasted exactly that.
This is why historic orthodoxy is not a safe, comfortable, middle-class club. It is perilous. It is a cosmic adventure.
So let's step back and look at this incredible journey Chesterton has taken us on today. We started by escaping the madness of pure logic, the suffocating, windowless cell of the materialist who has lost everything but cold reason. We broke out into the magic of Elfland, recovering the childlike wonder that sees every sunrise and every breath as a fresh, deliberate miracle from a joyful Father.
We learned how to be cosmic patriots, accepting the existence of the world with profound, fierce gratitude while simultaneously rebelling violently against its sin and brokenness.
Right.
We embraced the fierce paradoxes of the Christian life, holding courage and charity, wrath against injustice and mercy for the sinner, at full strength, perfectly balanced like the cables of a bridge.
We anchored ourselves in the democracy of the dead, honoring the ancient tradition that protects us from the toxic fads and arrogance of our current age. And we saw that historic dogma isn't a cage. It is the map that allows us to forget ourselves, shrink our egos, and actually enjoy the adventure of following a crucified and risen king.
Reading Orthodoxy, as we said at the beginning, is not just an intellectual exercise. It is a vital, urgent call to view your daily, ordinary Christian life as a thrilling romance.
It really is.
It equips you to wake up deeply grateful for the sunlight, ready to fight injustice in your sphere of influence, and deeply, passionately in love with the complex, majestic person of Jesus Christ.
I want to leave you with a final, lingering image from the very end of Chesterton's book. Something for you to mull over as you go about your day. Chesterton notes that when Jesus walked this broken earth, fully human and fully divine, he hid almost nothing of his human experience.
True.
He openly showed his tears at the sight of his city. He openly showed his blazing, terrifying anger in the temple. He hid none of his pathos, his exhaustion, or his grief. But Chesterton suggests there was one thing too massive, too overwhelming, and too great for God to show us while he walked in our fallen world.
Yeah.
There was one thing he had to hide during his earthly ministry, covering it with sudden silence or retreating to the isolation of the mountain.
It was his mirth, his joy.
Imagine that. Imagine the infinite, uncontainable, staggering joy of Christ, a joy so massive that our current fragile mortal frames couldn't even survive witnessing it. Let the promise of that invisible, awaiting joy fuel your daily devotion. Let it anchor you on your hardest days until the day you see him face to face and the shadows flee away and you finally come home.